Hello there and welcome. Welcome to Alta Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I am Alta's digital editor, and I am so excited to welcome you to today's discussion on what we've been calling Surviving the Sierra. Again, my name is Beth Spotswood. I see our Zoom group is joining us right now. Today, we're going to be discussing an expedition commissioned by Alta in which we retraced the first east to west crossing of the Sierra Nevada by non-native people. We did this 189 years after trapper Joseph R. Walker led 58 men on this very same intermountain western route. Written by Robert Roper, this extensive recounting of the expedition was featured as an article in Alta Journal and then a 6-part online series as part of Alta Serials. If you haven't read it yet, the weather and the upcoming holiday is the absolute perfect time to settle in and enjoy it. Our guests today are 3 of the 5-member team of Alta's expedition. Robert Roper, a novelist and biographer. He has a number of books, links to those we will be sending you, but his Fatal Mountaineer book won the Boardman Tasker Prize. Photographer Todd Seelie has worked throughout the globe. You've likely seen his work in the New York Times, Wired, Rolling Stone, Vice, and many more, including very regularly Alta Journal. And S.P. Parker is a noted climber and adventurer. He has partnered with Todd Vogel to found Sierra Mountain Center in 1996. These 3 gentlemen will be in conversation with Alta managing editor Blaise Zerega. Before I let them begin, some brief housekeeping. Again, Alta Live is the digital interview series we do here at Alta Journal. If you are unfamiliar with Alta, we are an award-winning quarterly magazine and website focused on California and the West. You can join us as a member for as little as $3 a month or join with an annual membership. That's $50 a year. You get 4 beautiful quarterly issues, a fabulous hat right now. We present the California Book Club. In fact, tomorrow we welcome Jaime Cortez, author of Gordo. That's a free series. We do free weekly events like this. We make a great gift for the holidays or for whatever is coming up in your life. So if you haven't joined us as a member yet and been considering it, now is an absolutely great time. altaonline.com/join to check that out. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions of our guests. They will chat with Blaise for about 30 or so minutes, and then we will get to as many of your questions as we can. Don't worry, this event will be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later today. We're also going to send you a link to this video, as well as links to Alta Serials, Robert's incredible work in Alta, and more. So it's exciting to see everyone here. The chat is open. Please let us know where you're zooming in from. And with that, I will turn it over to Blaise Zerega.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you. And welcome, Todd, Robert, SP. We've got 3 of the 5 members of the first Alta expedition. I'm so glad you're here. You made it back. And there's 2 other folks that we must give credit to who are also not able to join us today. Spencer Harding, who is also a photographer, and Omri Navan, who works with SP and was an assistant guide, I think, maybe how we describe him. And so to begin, I think I just want to, turn back the clock a little bit to the fall of 2021. And Robert and I had an email exchange, and I was sort of remarking, or in my head, I was thinking about how there was sort of this gap in sort of popular knowledge around between when the Spanish arrived in California and the gold rush. Like, what the heck happened for the first 50 years of the 19th century? And Robert had sent a note about perhaps recreating the Joseph Walker expedition, or even he was turned on to the book by Zenas Leonard, where he was the scribe who captured in his journals the expedition. And so maybe just to start, I could ask, like, Robert, how did this trip come about? What was your interest? What was your goal here?
My goal was just, straightforward. Like I said to you, I thought it might be possible and interesting fun to follow the route through the Sierras that these fur trappers took in 1833. And that question of what was the route is still much debated amongst experts. Was he here? Did he cross near Lake Tahoe, or did he cross near Yosemite? He's credited still by many serious historians as having been the first white man to lay eyes on Yosemite Valley. And I think that's false,
Yeah.
completely false. And but when I pitched the idea to you, it was like there had been an early snowstorm last fall, like in October, and I wrote you, I think, in November, and there'd been nothing, and all of the forecasts were, we're in a 1,200-year drought. It's going to be a dry year in the Sierra. It's a terrible, terrible thing. But I thought, well, it'll be cold, but it'll be really easy to get across. At least we won't have to deal with the snow.
Right.
And then between the time I sent it to you and you finally got back from me, you were probably on a vacation in Paris or something. I don't know why, but a tremendous amount of snow came down. And last December, ended up being the heaviest recorded snowfall month, heaviest December in recorded history in the Sierra. So, a tremendous amount of snow, 200 plus inches. So it was back to being a very snowy enterprise.
And so that was the decision to delay in part till the spring, right? And also just a little bit of context here is the Walker expedition started in Wyoming and went over 119 days, traveled eventually across the Sierras and then all the way out to Monterey, California. And Robert's note to me, I pulled it up earlier, the last sentence was something like, I'm going to need some equipment, but I won't need to hire any guides. So let's talk about SP. So how did SP get involved? SP Parker, guide extraordinaire, internationally known, has led groups everywhere. What was your reaction when, because Robert, you reached out to SP, not me.
Though I climbed with Robert a number of years ago when he wrote an article for Men's Journal way back when both of us were a lot younger and a lot less gray. So he got in contact with me and pitched the idea to me, and I said, sure, sounds good. I'm up for it. No, it all comes down to the weather.
Yep.
As we found out, and as Joseph Walker found out as well. No, Walker, I think, correct me if I'm wrong there, but Robert, but he went through in sort of late fall, but a very early winter. We went through in late winter, early spring, but very wintry conditions, and probably in a lot of ways similar to what Walker might have had. Between the storms that Robert talked about there in December, we really didn't get any more in the Sierra Nevada, throughout January, February, and into March. And then when everything was looking as if it was going to be dry and we'd be walking all the distance, we got more snow, and that changed everything. But I think the conditions we had were probably pretty realistic in dealing with, similar to what Walker had, apart from the fact that we didn't have 250 horses.
Right. So on that, and then Todd, you came along for this madcap adventure too. And what was your reaction when John reached out to you to see if you would be able to join these two?
Well, often when I hear from John, it's an interesting but challenging assignment. But he really raised.
John Gecky is the creative director of Alta Journal.
Yeah. But this time he really raised the bar. I was like, wait, you want me to do what? But I was interested. I was excited. I needed a lot more gear than I had, and kind of just got to work.
Well, I'd like to take a moment and show some photos of the expedition, and then we can just keep talking. So I think we've sort of laid a little bit of groundwork here. So I'm going to share my screen and hope this goes well. Let's see. I hope folks can see. This is Joseph Walker. Probably a photo in 1866. Looks like a really happy, warm gentleman. But maybe Robert, can you tell a little bit about what he's wearing or how his equipment is different from what you guys brought with you?
Yeah, well, I think SP probably had a sawed-off shotgun and didn't show it to us, but no, the firearm, of course, is something else. And the fringed looks like a leather fur-lined coat. That was, kind of something you might have seen amongst fur trappers in 1833. So this is 1860 something, and he's in his 60s. He at about that age, his eyesight started to fail, and that's what he had been leading expeditions well up into his 60s, And so he retired at this stage to the ranch of a nephew on the north slope of Mount Diablo.
Mm.
And he's you can't tell from this photo, but he's a very large man for his time. He was over 6'4", built large, and had a very, although he looks kind of mean with those little nasty eyes and those high cheekbones, it looks a little like Attila the Hun maybe, but he was had a very benign presence, and he was very people wanted to go on his expeditions, or they wanted to be led by him, because he had a reputation for finding his way. He was very, very smart about trails and geography, and he also almost never lost anybody on his expeditions, or like the Pioneer Trail expeditions that he led of people trying to get to California. So he was kind of a formidable guy, but did not have a large dominating personality, I would say. He had a large personality, but he wasn't a bullying type of man, something very different from that.
Right. So he was the SP of his day then.
Well, thank you.
So let's go to the current day. Here's day one then. Maybe Todd, you took this photo, so you're not in it. You folks want to say where this is and what your mood was this shot?
Yeah, well, sure. I'm pretending to smile there, although already my pack felt too heavy. But you look at SP's pack, this is like, this is a shot for, should be on his website, but a typical pack that he was carrying. And Omri is a tall, athletic guy, wonderful fellow, studying to be a guide. I think for him, it was really a thrill to get to work with SP for a few days. And he was a really great addition to the trip. And Spencer is I learned only after the trip what a redoubtable guy he is and how well known in the biking world. He's a bike packing guru, and has undertaken all kinds of extraordinary assignments, photographic assignments, and is very, very fit, and somehow had, he's been packing for expeditions for many years and brought all kinds of subtle expertise to that. Todd too. Todd, I think, is not, his photographic fame is based on not just outdoor photography.
Yeah. Todd's photographed sharks and burrows and bookstores and space, the Pacific Coast Trail.
Sure. And but I think his photographs of urban personalities or cultural figures are really extraordinary. So I think he just put himself. He did what he had to do. He had to prepare for this expedition, which was coming together and discovering what it was as he was trying to prepare for it. So anyway, that was our group plus Todd.
So this is day one at Grover Hot Springs. And again, the Walker expedition in total was 119 days and I don't know, hundreds of miles. And here it is, day one, 5 men, 6 days for what became a 34-mile journey. So let's get to it then. Here, this image, maybe someone could describe what's happening here as you hike through the zombie forest.
Yeah, Todd, why don't you describe it? You were looking.
Sure. I mean, the first day we were basically starting from Grover Hot Springs and climbing up, but they had recently had a really bad wildfire, so pretty much the entire forest had burned. So the soil was really loose and very slippery. But yeah, it's as sad as it is, it made for very striking images, So I was just trying to figure out how to show the group moving through the forest, but not diminish the impact that the environment really had on that moment. But it was also, it was a pretty striking way to start a 6-day trip. Yeah.
And did the Walker team, did they encounter, wildfires that seem, what my understanding is, obviously they're not obviously, but they're pervasive now. Whereas in 1833, coming out of the mini ice age and so on, I mean, did Walker encounter any ashes or burnt out forest? Do we know?
Well, on the other side of the Sierra, once they had gotten through, they saw a number of wildfires in the autumn in the Central Valley, but they were nothing like the catastrophic events that we're having now. It was just, but fire is a natural part of the landscape.
Mhm.
For me, it was kind of interesting and a little unexpected how bleak and deadened the landscape was this first day, and then we emerged into the higher altitude Sierra realm, which was pretty untouched. And
Yeah, here we are. Starting to see
that was like a marvelous transition. And in my mind, I associated with here we have some bear tracks. We saw a ton of bear tracks, but that first day, just as we were emerging from the what I call the zombie forest, we saw a mother bear, good size russet colored bear with 3 cubs, and Spencer spotted them, and then they ran away from us up a steep granite face. The mother bear handling it really pretty well, and the 3 cubs struggling behind her. But it was kind of a great moment. SP later pointed out that there were going to be a lot of bears emerging from hibernation just as we were moving along, and that they were going to be ornery and hungry, and they might be, giving us some trouble. But we didn't have any trouble.
So a couple questions here for SP. One is, SP is the only member of the party who is on skis. Everyone else was on snowshoes. And why did you choose to travel on skis?
I'm a skier. I prefer to be on skis if I need to, if I want to. The skis can be a more efficient mode of travel depending on the snow. I managed to get a few turns in on the downhills.
But there were some photos that are not, we probably won't have time to do them today, but where you're going uphill your skis. I thought, oh my Lord, how do you do that?
On the skins, if you look on the base of the ski there, you can see there's a skin attached. It's kind of, the original skins were actually made from seal skin. They're like a carpet, they slide forward, they grip when you put a little back pressure on them. So that's the standard way of utilizing skis and skins to go uphill.
Wow.
I'm just biased towards skis. On the other hand, we had a lot of thick undergrowth, manzanita to get through, and they're kind of a liability. But at that point, everything's a liability. So
yeah, and I mean, Robert mentions this in his writing about the journey, how I think I don't know if it was true for Walker, but I think it was true for you guys, that you sort of were following the paths of bears coming out of hibernation, that animals know the route to go. And so in this case, did you follow these tracks? No way, too fresh. Let's get out of
here. The bears are wandering around, they're looking for food. They know where they're going, but we were taking the short line. They're deviating to see what they can find. Yep. But they're probably heading down to the campgrounds, waiting for them to open up.
So here's another image. This is Robert, I believe, following many footsteps. Just a great shot here of what was, I guess, I'm guessing you would go up to Tahoe or Sierra Nevada, high altitudes. I mean, how would you train and prepare for something like this? SP, you seem like you're probably always in shape.
I just do it. I'm not really a big fan of training. I just go out and do it. So I've got snow 10 feet away out my windows, so it's not a big problem for me to get out in the afternoon for a few hours.
Yeah, it was a problem for me. I don't know about Todd. My impression of Todd was that he was super fit, the day he was born, but maybe he even trained. But like I don't have snow right out of my window. I live in Berkeley, and so you know, I mean, I rode my bike a lot. I took a lot of walks. I carried heavy weights up steep hills. And to be frank, it was a half-assed training regimen. I don't like to train either. I could have done a whole lot more. But one day when I was carrying a dictionary in my pack up Marin Avenue, if anybody knows Berkeley, is a very steep road, very steep street. And my knees started to hurt a little bit. And for some reason, my knees have always been pretty good. So I took that as a sign that I shouldn't overtrain. And, I think, I probably did just basically enough. At my age, you do too much, you go down the other side. So, but some training was definitely necessary. I mean, for me, I always need to watch out for acclimatizing. So it doesn't happen as quickly as it does for some people. For me, and so before we launched from Markleyville, I went to Mammoth, which is like at 8,000 feet, something like that, and slept a couple of nights in a motel there. So I was really fine, climatization wise. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to train.
How about you, Todd? Did you have to do anything like this?
I did a little bit. I'm a pretty regular cyclist, so fortunately that's just kind of built in. So I just made sure I wasn't really slacking on that. My major concern was actually balancing the weight of the pack and the gear and making sure that that fit really well, and I was going to be able to do well with that. So yeah.
So here is, let me see. There we go. Here's another picture from the journey. Here's SP on his skis looking down, and they're looking at a frozen lake. And I think that the lake is probably both a opportunity for a shortcut and also a potential risk. And SP, why would you lead the group across the lake sometimes, or seem to be navigating towards them?
In the right conditions, lakes are a shortcut. You want to cross them when they've got thick ice on them. There's often the blue you see here around the edges. However, this also has melted out parts in the middle. You've got to watch out for outlets and inlets. We elected not to go across this lake because it was just too dangerous to do. We had to go around on the sides, which added distance, added time. It was fairly awkward to get around, but it was the safest option. There were some lakes we did cross. Just got to play it by what you find and not make any assumptions. I was on people to spread out going across the lakes and to keep an eye on each other.
And you, Robert mentioned that also there was, a couple times, I'll call it the potential for an avalanche, where perhaps you advise the group to spread out as well. How would you go about that, or when would you be worried about an avalanche?
Again, it depends on the conditions at the time and at that time of year. The biggest problem you have are what are called wet loose avalanches, which are primarily a function of temperature and solar input. So those are things just to watch out for. And we did traverse below some steep slopes that the sun was hitting. We wouldn't have gone there if I didn't have if I wasn't fairly confident that there wasn't going to be a problem. However, you go ahead and you stack the odds in your favor by simply spreading out further. So if something goes wrong, not the entire group is caught in an avalanche.
Mm-hmm. And then Robert also talks about in the story, looming in his mind is eventually you're going to have to cross the North Fork of the Mokelumne River, which is a raging river and so forth. And it's keeping him awake at night. And lo and behold, you get down there, and there's this what we call the tree of life. Lo and behold, it had fallen in the right place at the right time. How did this come about, and what were your reactions upon finding this miracle?
Well, my reaction was astonishment, because not only did this perfectly large and solid tree fall all the way across the river, but it fell right where we wanted to cross Moqualamy. Because we were following Walker's track, and Walker, after he got across the Moqualamy, at a different time of year when it wasn't in spate, it wasn't full of raging icy water, he crossed at a place where there's a broad, relatively broad canyon, and it can take you up high again, and which is where Walker wanted to go. And that's where this tree decided to fall.
Mhm.
It fell right there at the mouth of Jackson Canyon, as it's now called.
Yeah.
And you know, I've fooled around crossing streams on trees before. Usually they fall and they fall kind of across, but it's the crown of the tree with the limbs that are kind of thinner that's resting on the far bank. And so you get across a little ways and then you have to really invent your way across. This one, the solid trunk was all the way across. And so that's, you know.
And Walker did not have, as far as I know, I didn't read all of Dennis Leonard, but you know, he didn't have this miracle. In fact, they had times they had to like lift their horses, pull them up cliffs or lower them down. And there was 250 horses at least to begin with. And eventually they had to eat some of their horses. And, you know, I guess you were all spared that by this, again, the tree of life. And here's a shot from sort of the final days. You began your descent. And you're the brink of a mountain. The end is near, is finishing here. And you can get a sense of the terrain that this group covered. I don't have a picture of any granite shells really, but yeah, just what were you feeling at this moment here when you're, you know, I guess as Leonard called it, on the brink of the mountain?
Well, my feeling was relief, and also it was like I think I talk in one of the articles about you know, like on a trip like this where you're duplicating a historic crossing, say, and you know, you can sort of fool around and imagine, am I a guy in 1833? And I didn't really do much of that, except at that point I was full of relief and kind of awe. And I did imagine Walker and some of his trappers coming up on the top and actually looking out. Walker with a little spyglass, and Zenas Leonard, his scribe on the trip, stood there on that edge and looked and looked. And Zenas Leonard wrote a wonderful description of what they saw and what Walker said. Walker said that they were looking down into the Central Valley, and they could see a long expanse of the Central Valley. It was all yellow. It was fall foliage of a kind, probably tall grasses, shrubs that were turning. And Walker, and you know, he wasn't accurate, but perhaps he was a little carried away. He said, "It looks to me as though it has the character of a beach." and I think the Pacific Ocean is right there at the horizon. That was it was a little farther than that, but they were just ecstatic. And they've been living on, I don't really know what, for the last 10 days or so, because they ran out of food pretty much at the start of the crossing, and the crossing took them 2 weeks. So just to cross the Sierra took them 2 weeks. And they've been living on really very, very little. They talk about eating juniper berries, not the most delicious berries either. And they hadn't killed any fresh game for many days. And finally, just when they got over and started to descend a little bit, they caught it. They killed a small deer, and they killed a bear. I apologize for the effect that this may be having on any vegetarians, but they were ecstatic to get into a game-filled world again. And they just went, you know, they shot a lot of animals. They had begun with all those horses that they started with were to carry each man was carrying 60 pounds of dried buffalo meat. And they figured that would get them through, but they had exhausted that by the time they got up into the high Sierras. And so they were starving.
Yeah, and we haven't mentioned this yet, but I mean, a lot of what Walker's wayfinding was dependent upon indigenous knowledge and existing trails. And so could you actually talk a little bit about that, you know, how reliant the group was upon the various tribes that they encountered?
Yeah, I mean, when they started in Wyoming, at the rendezvous site on the Green River, they were on Indian trails the whole way across the Rockies, then down into the Great Basin. They headed to, they walked around the northern shore of the Great Salt Lake. They were following Indian trails the whole time, and Walker he had been trading with and parleying with Indian people in the West for, you know, a good 15 years by then. He was in his early 30s. And he was particularly fond of the Shoshone people. They ran into a small group of Western Shoshone, and he sat down with them and said, how do we get across? What do we look for? And Zenas Leonard wrote a very detailed account of what the headman of that group said to him. Very detailed instructions. And he said, there are trails. Every day you'll find water if you stay on our paths across the Great Basin. And then you'll get to the river, Humboldt River, which you follow that essentially. And then et cetera, and naming other landmarks they should look for. And so their way across was, you know, I mean, what was remarkable perhaps about Walker was that he recognized the unpeopled wilderness West as actually a deeply humanized, deeply settled world. Even though it was kind of barren looking, there was Indian sign every day, and the native people showed themselves to these trappers when they wanted to, and sometimes aided them, and crucially. So shortly after, 2 years after this expedition was over, when Walker had returned to the Rockies, he married a Shoshone woman, his beloved wife, who about in 1841, 1842, he took her back to Independence, Missouri, to introduce her to his family, a large Protestant family, and they went to church with the family, and his family in Missouri appears to have embraced her and their children. Very sadly, this remarkable woman who was painted by artists in the West traveling with Walker, and all accounts of Walker's mention his wife until 1846, when she's no longer in evidence. And what had happened was there was a terrible cholera epidemic in 1846, and she and all their children died in it. So after that, Walker never traveled with a woman. So yeah, it was there were problems when the Walker Party encountered a large collection of northern Paiute people in the Great Basin, closer to the mountains. They got into a very confused situation that historians are still debating. But anyway, there was gunfire, and they killed several of the Paiutes, and after that, they were abandoned by the Indian people. Nobody wanted to parley with them. Nobody wanted to give them any advice, and they were really on their own. And when they went up into the Sierra, I think Walker was probably counting on meeting some friendly person who would say, "Oh yeah, if you go up there, look for the White Rock, and where the river split, that's the way we go across." Because of course, the local people had been crossing the Sierra thousands of years, but nobody would talk to them, and so they were completely on their own, and it became a much more dire situation. I wanted to mention one more thing.
Yeah, 'cause we're running, I realize we're way over on our time here. but,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
All right,
but
well, I just wanted to say it was really a pleasure to watch SP on his skis. He's really a masterful skier. And when you were, just your question, how are you going to do this and carrying those skis? And when you saw him, he was easy. He went up steep snow slopes more easily than we did on snowshoes.
wow.
And coming down, of course, he was mocking us.
Well,
because-
let's ask. I mean, I ask everyone quite like, what was the hardest part for you, SP, of this journey?
Getting back to civilization, so-called.
Yeah.
You always get into the mountains, you're there, you're dealing with the conditions you're dealt, and then suddenly you're picked up in a vehicle and you're in somewhere beautiful like Fresno, or I can't remember where we went, but I've done a number of crossings of the Sierra in the winter and spring. So I'm fairly comfortable with dealing with that, but I think it's worthwhile considering how Walker had to deal without any maps, without any local knowledge, and without people wanting to help him. And going through the terrain that we went through, we were always asking ourselves, WWWD, what would Walker do?
Yeah, exactly. And then Todd, quick question for you. What was the hardest thing for you?
I would say I was worried about a lot of different things going into it. But the thing that ended up probably being the consistent challenge was just carrying so much weight, equipment, batteries, and all this stuff, but then somehow needing to be faster than everyone to reposition myself ahead of the group or up a slope or all the different places I needed to be. So just, I'm not used to carrying that much weight and also, working at the same time. So
yeah. Well done. So I'm sorry, I definitely let the clock, I lost track of the clock here. And so I got time for I guess we'll try to get 3 quick questions in. The first question is, from William, did the group rope up at times? I'm not even sure what rope up means. SP?
No, we didn't.
No.
We took along a rope when we thought we might have to pack raft across, but that was just a lightweight polypropylene rope to get the boats back and forth. But no, we did not.
And then Sharon asked just a little bit more about where did you end? We talked about where we start. You guys started in Grover Springs, but where did you actually finish your journey? And what did you do? Was there a bottle of champagne buried in the snow somewhere or something like that?
Well, we ended physically pretty much right where the Walker party ended on this ridge called Sleeping Indian Ridge, which looks, it's not that far from Highway 4, if anybody knows where that is. And but as soon as we got down, I had arranged for a friend of mine, Paul Gruber, to rent a gigantic SUV, and that would carry us and all our equipment. And he met us. And that was a great miracle. Not a miracle, but because he's always very competent. But it was a very welcome sight. And then, although SP was undergoing turmoil, re-entering civilization, he's always happier out there. I was really happy as hell, and that we had gotten through and somehow pulled it off. And then we went and ate some bad food, I think in Jackson.
All right, and then the last question, we'll talk about the bad food later, is just some people ask you, how did you sleep? How did you stay warm? So did you build ice caves, or did you stay in tents, or what kind of sleeping bags did you use? And maybe SP, a quick word on that for people who may want to try this at home.
No, don't try it at home. We took along tents. Snow caves and igloos are warmer and more weatherproof, but they take an awful lot of time to build. We had some fairly good tents, or at least I did. Robert's one was a little on the edge. No, I think he bought that, was that a leftover from Walker? I'm not quite sure.
He bought it when he was a Boy Scout, a Cub Scout.
Quite possibly. So just good quality sleeping bags, down sleeping bags, insulated pads, that sort of stuff. And I find sleeping on snow not too bad. You can smooth out the lumps, you can make it nice and flat, and I find relative comfort.
All right,
You're always looking for dry ground if you can, but snow is not too
So we'll close this now with the image of sleeping on snow, but maybe ask Beth to come back and see us through here. Any last?
I'm now convinced to beg my way onto an SP adventure for like a 3-hour tour, maybe not a 6-day.
Oh, you know what happens on 3-hour tours. So-
Right. We'll end up stranded on a mountaintop together. With that, I'm so grateful to all of our guests today. Again, to our audience, thank you so much. This has been recorded, will be posted to altaonline.com later today, along with links to the entire story, more photo, video, whatever you want to know about this adventure and Walker's original expedition. We've got links and we will shoot you an email to that. You can also find it on altaonline.com. Before you go, I'd like to invite you next week, December 21st, here at Alta Live, 12:30. We are welcoming 3 independent booksellers, experts from 3 bookstore partners, including Book Passage in Corte Madera, Diesel, a bookstore in Santa Monica, and Warwick's bookstore in La Jolla, California, for last minute book picks, what to give everyone on your list, including The Wild Adventurer. So join us for that. With that, thank you so much, Robert, Todd, SP, and Blaise, for an amazing and really inspiring and exciting Alta Live today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Todd, Robert, SP, really.
Thank you.
I'd love this to
Thank
stay
you.
on, but thank you. So much fun.
Take care, all. Bye.